I was house-sitting for a friend named Rowena while she was away on a mountain trip with her family. Her house was nestled deep in the woods outside the quiet town of Grey Pines. Serene, secluded, and a little too quiet at night. Rowena had a black cat named Nyx, fiercely independent but terribly afraid of thunderstorms. And wouldn't you know it, the weekend brought a relentless storm, thunder rolling across the sky like distant war drums. It had started the day before she left and never really stopped. I spent the first night there with no issues. Nyx mostly hid beneath the bed, trembling through the thunderclaps. The next morning, I was lounging on her oversized couch near the window, flipping through a worn paperback. The rain tapped against the glass in a rhythmic, almost hypnotic way. Then, out of nowhere, the landline phone rang. One of those old, clunky ones with a jarring mechanical ring that echoed through the empty house. The caller ID simply read, "Unknown number." I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, it rang again. Same thing, but this time, a message was left. A man's voice, low, whispery, like a breath in a crypt, spoke a single word, "Rowena," and then, dead silence followed by a click. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Maybe it was just a relative? A friend? I texted Rowena to let her know someone had called her landline, but she never responded. Perhaps she had no signal where she was. Over the next 3 hours, the same number called 2 more times, but left no message. The unease crept in like fog under a door. By nightfall, I had gone upstairs to watch an old film in the master bedroom. Halfway through, I remembered to check on Nyx and make sure she had food and water. I padded downstairs, and there she was. Nyx stood stiff at the front door, staring intently at the thin gap beneath it. Her ears were flattened, her body coiled. I called her name. She looked at me, then turned her gaze back to the door, like something was out there. I swallowed hard and walked to the door, slowly leaning toward the peephole. The glass was fogged with rain, smeared and distorted. Shapes blurred and shifted. But then something moved, just enough for me to recognize a figure standing on the porch. I froze, tried to focus, but the rain and condensation made it impossible to tell what I was seeing. Still, no knock, no sound, just presence. Minutes passed. Nothing changed. I convinced myself it was just my nerves, just shadows playing tricks. I walked away to refill Nyx's bowl and grab some snacks. When I passed by the door again, she was gone. I hesitated, then looked out once more. That blurry shape I'd seen before? It wasn't there anymore. Something had definitely been standing there, watching. With growing dread, I picked up Nyx and brought her upstairs with me, locking the bedroom door behind us. I resumed the movie, but the air in the room felt thick, heavy, as if something was just waiting. About 30 minutes passed before Nyx jumped off the bed and approached the bedroom door. She didn't scratch, didn't look back, just stared at the crack beneath it, exactly like she had at the front door. My blood went cold. I whispered her name, voice trembling, but she didn't react. Her entire focus was locked on that sliver beneath the door. Heart hammering, I slowly stepped forward, pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. Then I crouched, lowered my head to peer through the crack, and there they were, pair of feet, standing just inches away. I gasped and stumbled back, adrenaline crashing through me. My eyes snapped to the doorknob. I hadn't even locked it. I slammed the bolt down just as whoever was on the other side took off down the stairs, their footsteps thundering against the hardwood floor. I called 911. Then I called Rowena. When the police arrived, the house was empty. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no trace. They believed it was a stalker, most likely someone who had been fixated on Rowena. Not me. The calls, the silent presence. They probably thought the house was empty when I didn't answer the phone. Maybe they had planned to wait until she came back. We never found out who it was, or what they were planning to do, and that's what keeps me awake at night. It was late November when I lost my job. My name's Evan Mercer, 31 years old. Recently laid off due to downsizing at the publishing company I'd worked at for over 7 years. I had enough savings to scrape by for a while, but the silence that crept into my life from being alone every day, that was harder to deal with than the job loss. I spent days in my small apartment in Moss Hollow, scrolling endlessly through job sites, resume templates, cover letters. 2 weeks in, the silence had grown unbearable. No emails, no callbacks, no hope. In desperation, I started exploring lesser-known job boards. That's when I found it, a vague listing for a regional sales consultant with surprisingly high pay. No company name, just an email and the words, "Immediate hire, apply tonight." I sent in my resume. An hour later, I got a reply. The person called himself Damien. His message was brief, overly casual for something so formal. "Hey Evan, got your info. Crazy busy week, but I can do a quick interview tonight at 7:30. You good to stop by?" I didn't question the urgency. I didn't want to seem uncommitted. The address he sent was unfamiliar, a commercial park just outside town, near an old industrial stretch. By 7:15, I was parked outside a squat, one-story building with no signs, no lights, nothing but an address number nailed crookedly to a rusted doorframe. Not a single other car in sight. The parking lot was empty, and the building looked abandoned. I sat in my car for a while, unease creeping in. I double-checked the address. It matched the email. Still no one. I called the number from Damien's email. No answer. Called again. Nothing. At 7:45, I gave up and left, cursing myself for being gullible. I figured it was a prank, or just some disorganized startup with no idea how to handle applicants. Frustrated, I drove home through the dark back roads, trying to shake the weirdness of it all. When I got home, I grabbed a beer, turned on the TV, and slouched into the couch, letting exhaustion wash over me. Outside, the wind picked up, moaning against the windows. Typical November weather. Somewhere past 10 p.m., I turned off the lights and headed up to bed. The last thing I remember is laying my head down, eyes heavy, until I woke up. Not from a noise, not from a dream, just a feeling. I was lying on my side, room completely dark, heart slowly beginning to race. Something felt off, and then I heard it, that creaking sound. Not the usual groan of an old apartment. It was subtle, deliberate, inside the room. I blinked into the darkness, eyes barely adjusting. Then it came, a slow, sliding sound. The closet door. It was moving, opening. I was frozen in place, body paralyzed by fear. My breath caught in my throat as I watched, eyes straining. And then, something leaned out, just a shape, a human figure, partially hidden behind the door, motionless. Watching. He wasn't moving, not a twitch, just standing there, like he was hoping I hadn't noticed him. My heart kicked back into gear. I lunged for my phone and bolted out of bed, rushing for the door, keeping as much distance between me and the closet as I could. Still, he didn't move. I ran out into the hallway and called 911, breath shaky, adrenaline roaring in my ears. I stayed outside on the lawn, staring through the front window, watching the top of the stairs, praying he wouldn't come down. The police arrived fast. I pointed them upstairs, and when they opened that closet door, he was still inside, crouched behind hanging coats, not hiding anymore, just staring, wide-eyed, greasy hair sticking to his forehead like seaweed. He didn't speak a word as they pulled him out in handcuffs. It only took a few days for the full story to unravel. His real name was never publicly released, but what we found out was this. He had created hundreds of fake job listings across multiple lesser-known job sites. He'd bait desperate people, gather their full names, addresses, resumes, everything. He knew exactly when I'd be out, heading to that phony interview. That night, while I was gone, he'd broken into my apartment, and he'd waited. He was already inside when I went to bed. I don't know what he planned to do. Maybe not even he knew. But I thank whatever instinct kept me alive that night. Some things you never want to find out the hard way. I live alone in a small, aging farmhouse in the flatlands of North Dakota, surrounded by nothing but empty fields and winding dirt roads. The closest neighbor is 5 miles away. The nearest town, if you can even call it that, is a ghost of civilization about 20 minutes north. I'm Walter, 51 years old, retired early due to a back injury. These days, my life moves in quiet circles. I don't lock my doors during the day. Out here, I never felt the need to. It had been raining for nearly a week. The kind of slow, relentless downpour that seeps into the bones of the house. It was a Tuesday, around noon, when I stepped out onto my front porch with a cigarette and a mug of coffee, listening to the rain as it tapped across the rusted tin roof. That's when I saw him. At first, just a speck in the distance. A motorbike slicing through the gray, cutting down the dirt road that leads to my house. I squinted through the rain. It wasn't uncommon for people to get lost out here, to confuse my driveway for a trail. But he didn't turn back. He kept coming. The closer he got, the more I realized something wasn't right. He wasn't riding a typical dirt bike. It was old, loud, and out of place, like something from the 80s. He wore a full-face helmet, black jacket, and no identifying markings. When he reached the edge of my garage, he stopped and stared, not at the landscape, not at the road. He stared at my house, at me. I stood still on the porch, cigarette burning between my fingers. He lingered for a few seconds longer, then finally turned around and rode back the way he came. No wave, no nod, just gone. It left me cold, uneasy. Still, I convinced myself it was just a confused traveler. Maybe he was looking for someone. Maybe he was checking GPS. Maybe he was just weird. By sunset, I had mostly forgotten the incident. The rain turned vicious around 8 p.m., thunder cracking like whips above the fields, lightning carving jagged veins through the clouds. The kind of storm that makes the lights flicker and the walls creak. And then, I heard it again. That same engine, low and rumbling, somewhere out in the dark. I looked through the front window and sure enough, there was a headlight piercing the fog and rain, inching closer. But then it went out. Instantly, I could no longer see him. He never came up the driveway this time. He never passed by the garage. He just disappeared into the storm. I stood there, frozen at the window for what felt like forever, listening for any movement. Nothing. I didn't call the cops. What would I even say? A guy came to my house, didn't do anything, then left in the rain? But deep inside, something felt wrong. I grabbed my shotgun from the closet, just in case. For the next hour, I paced from room to room, checking every window. I didn't see anything. Not until the second round of my checks, when I looked out the back window and caught a glimpse of movement. A dark shape cutting through the fog just beyond the barn. I held my breath, and then I heard them. Footsteps, wet, heavy boots slogging through the mud just outside. I moved from window to window trying to track him, but each time I looked, he was already gone, like he knew where I'd be watching. That's when it hit me. He was testing the house, walking the perimeter, watching my behavior, learning how I moved. It was no mistake. This man had come here with a purpose, and I didn't want to find out what it was. I rushed into the garage, jumped in my truck, and backed out quickly, leaving the garage door wide open. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. I turned the truck around and hit the high beams, pointing them directly at the house. And that's when I saw him, standing at the side window, drenched in black, unmoving. His helmet was off now, his face pale, expressionless. And in his hand was a rusted claw hammer, gripped tightly. He didn't look startled. He didn't run. He just stared into my window until I flicked on the bar lights above the truck. That's when he bolted, sprinted back through the mud, toward a patch of high grass. I saw him retrieve his motorbike, lying hidden there the whole time. He rode off into the darkness. I stayed awake until the sky turned gray, shotgun by my side. The next morning, I drove into town and reported the encounter to the sheriff's office. They filed it under suspicious activity. But I know what it was. He wasn't lost. He wasn't looking for help. He had planned something, and if I hadn't acted when I did, maybe that hammer would have ended up lodged in something far worse than a window. My name is Lucas Marin. I'm 29 years old and a nature photographer. About 6 months ago, I booked a week-long stay at an old cabin near the edge of Stygian Ridge, a remote stretch of forest in northern Montana. It was a perfect getaway. No signal, no neighbors, just misty hills and endless trees. I'd found the cabin on an obscure travel site. No reviews, no owner name, just a few grainy photos and a PayPal link. I needed the silence, or at least I thought I did. The first 2 nights were peaceful. I spent my days hiking trails, taking photos of owls and moss-covered stones, and listening to the wind through the pines. At night, I'd light a fire and let the forest lull me to sleep. But on the 3rd night, something changed. I was in bed, listening to the rain tap on the roof when I heard it. A thump, not inside, underneath. The cabin was built on wooden stilts, slightly elevated over the wet forest floor. Whatever it was, it had struck the underside. Not once, but twice. I froze, then sat up and listened. Nothing. Maybe it was an animal. A deer, a bear, a log rolling down the hill. I went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting. The next morning, I checked around the cabin. Mud, fallen branches, no signs of wildlife. But under the porch, I saw something strange. A section of earth that looked disturbed, like someone had crawled beneath the slats and moved around. I told myself it was nothing, paranoia from being alone too long. But that night, it happened again. This time, the thumps were heavier, like fists slamming against wood. The entire floor shuddered beneath me. I jumped out of bed and grabbed my flashlight, shined it through the slats in the floorboards. Nothing. Then I heard breathing, right beneath me, not panting, not animal-like, slow, human, controlled. I backed away, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Suddenly the lights in the cabin cut out. Total darkness. My flashlight flickered, then died. I couldn't see a thing, only feel the faint tremors in the floor and the creak of wood, as if someone was crawling beneath the boards. I bolted out the door and didn't stop running until I reached the car. I slept inside it that night, doors locked, engine ready. I planned to leave in the morning, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me at sunrise. I returned to the cabin. It looked untouched, but I needed proof. I grabbed my camera and crouched down under the porch. That's when I saw them. Fingerprints, smudged across the wood beams, dug into the dirt, like someone had been lying there, reaching upward night after night. And further in, a pile of fabric, a sleeping bag, a jug of water, bones. Someone had been living beneath the cabin, watching, listening, waiting. I left that same hour, called the county sheriff's office when I got into town. They searched the area but found no one, just the remnants. They told me this wasn't the first time someone had reported something like that. Apparently, there was a man years ago who used to live in those woods. He vanished after being evicted from a hunting lodge nearby. Some say he went feral. Others say he never really left, just learned how to disappear. Blended with the trees, slipped between floorboards, stayed beneath. They never found him. But that breathing, I still hear it sometimes. Especially when I'm alone, lying in bed at night, waiting to fall asleep. My name is Elena Rourke, 34 years old. I work as an environmental field researcher, mostly documenting water systems and their ecological impact in remote areas. It's a lonely job, but I prefer it that way. Nature doesn't lie. People do. This story takes place last fall, when I was sent on a solo survey expedition near Black Hollow Creek, a narrow, slow-moving waterway tucked deep in the Colorado wilderness. near the edge of a forgotten forest known as Grimwood. The area had no recent data, and according to the report, no residents within a 10-mile radius. Just abandoned cabins, some collapsed into mossy graves, and winding paths long overgrown with vines. My assignment was simple: take water samples, track runoff data, and send weekly reports. I'd be there for 2 weeks, stationed in a small ranger outpost at the edge of the forest. No electricity, no service, but I had a satellite phone in case of emergency. The first week went fine, uneventful, calm even, until the footsteps began. They started as soft crunches outside my cabin around 2 a.m. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in nature, deliberate, slow, like someone walking in boots, circling the cabin. The first night I stayed in bed. I convinced myself it was just a deer. The second night I stayed up. They came again. Same time, same pattern, circling. One step after another, then stopping, waiting. I opened the door with a flashlight in hand, shined it into the trees. Nothing. But when I turned to go back inside, I saw them. Prints in the mud. Human. Barefoot. But too long. Too wide. Almost wrong. The third night, I set up a trail camera behind the cabin. The next morning, I checked the footage. For the first few hours, it recorded normal movement, raccoons, wind. But at exactly 2:17 a.m., something triggered the sensor. And in the frame stood a figure, tall, still, standing just at the tree line. Unmoving. It stood there for 43 minutes. Then, frame by frame, it moved closer. But never on screen. It would disappear and reappear closer. Until the final frame, where it stood right at the camera, face unseen. Then static. The device fried. It never turned back on. I wanted to leave, but the water samples weren't finished. And I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a hiker. Maybe someone messing with me. So I stayed. That night, the forest went dead silent. No owls. No wind. Just the sound of my breath and the clock ticking. Then something tapped on the window. I jumped. Flashlight in hand, I stepped toward it. Another tap. It was soft, rhythmic. Not fingers. Not knuckles. Nails. I pulled back the curtain. Nothing there. I opened the door. Stillness. But when I turned around, I froze. The kitchen floor was wet. Footprints. Leading from the back door. All the way to my bed. I hadn't heard it open. I hadn't heard anything. I ran. Out the front. Into the night. Into the trees. I didn't stop running for miles. Eventually, I found an abandoned fire tower. I climbed to the top, shaking, heart beating in my throat. I stayed there until sunrise. The rangers found me the next afternoon after I finally got a distress call through the satellite phone. They never found signs of forced entry. No footprints. No tampered doors. They said maybe I hallucinated from stress. But I know what I saw, what I felt. Before I left, one of the older rangers pulled me aside. "You're not the first," he said, eyes heavy. "People come out here. Some don't come back. Some do, but they're different. That place, Black Hollow, it draws them." "Draws who?" I asked. He just looked at me. "The ones who stay beneath. The watchers. The leftovers." Weeks later, I got a call from a local university lab. They were analyzing my water samples. They asked me something odd. "Did you take these from a well?" "No," I said. "From the creek." They paused. "Because the DNA trace, it's human. Multiple strands. But degraded. Almost like the body. Dissolved into the water. Not drowned. Absorbed." I never responded. I've moved cities. Changed numbers. I don't hike anymore. But some nights at 2:17 a.m., I still wake up to the sound of footsteps just outside my door. Waiting.